Hey YouTubers, this is part 2 of my video on how to get more gas volume out of a vacuum jet carburetor that sucks the gas uphill. In case you didn't see the other one, you can't just put a tank up above and run a hose from the up above tank to the gas cap like I thought when I was a kid. I'm an old man now, but when I was a kid I thought, well, I'll just seal that cap off real good, solder a spigot on it and go right to the, without a float, it'll just overflow and run out the vent. So I pussyfooted around for 50 years and didn't do anything about this idea of mine. I had thought about taking a lid off a 8 horsepower Briggs & Stratton float carburetor, cutting all this off and putting the 8 carburetor on the lid so I'd have benefit of its float. But that would have looked goofy with a big old, it would have had a throttle shaft and everything up in the way. It just wouldn't have been cool. So to get around having not much volume there, I don't want to get out on my motorbike and get stranded and have to pedal the damn thing home. And I'm not planning on using this particular tank because it's really not a whole lot more volume than this tank. Some, but not much. I'll find a good sized tank. But what I did, I took the lid off that Harley-Davidson golf car voltage regulator, which is still good in case anybody were to need one. Mounted in rubber, so it's vibration proof. I took the lid off of a Tillotson 2-cycle carburetor. Got a spring-loaded throttle shaft. It's in real good shape. No play at all. Shame to take it apart, but you got to do what you got to do. And I needed that float assembly. And I wanted it clean looking and not all cobbled up. So I took the lid off of the voltage regulator, made an adapter plate, put the Tillotson float and needle. It's got spring-loaded needle, so there's constant preload on it. Once it seals off, it's a done deal. You move your bike around a little bit sloshes in. Once you settle it, it's got upward pressure, and it's safer. That carburetor is a piece of junk. See the crack in it? Cracked all the way around. I just used it for the 2 bolt holes. In fact, it's actually a bigger carburetor than what this little David Bradley motor that it's going to go on, this little cultivator motor. It's going to eventually go on a Mercury bicycle up there. And it'll be similar to this old Elgin bicycle with a little Briggs. But see, it had it with those little bitty tanks, you're limited, especially that one I'm showing you a picture of now. It's got the slanted tank. You can't put a whole lot of gas in it, and I'm not fond of walking. My lower back ain't worth a damn these days. All right, what I'm going to do is put this on, this tank on in place of this tank, which is a good tank, but look what I've done to it over the years. Well, actually, I did them all at once. Now I traded it off, then I got it back. It's an old motor, 50s. All right. I took a piece of an old belt, a leather waist belt, pants belt. Cut some biscuits out of it with a old 30-30 shell. I think that's what it was, some kind of big old shell. Then punched holes in the leather with a leather puncher. I couldn't find 2 screws the right thread for that long for my adapter plate I made, so I had to poke a nut up on a bolt, cut it off, weld the nut fluid tight. But the rubber, or the leather rather, sinks into indentations in that lid off of the voltage regulator. So that's going to have a shorter suction tube, not a whole lot of volume in there, similar to what the Pulsa jets are nowadays. The vacuum jet just pulled it straight up out of the tank. I think I got my names right. I get confused easy, but it's a single line system. Now it'll have a constant amount of fuel. It won't be starving when it's down here and chugging and flooding when it's up there. It'll be regulated by the height of the float. But the biggest thing is, that's important, but the biggest thing is it's going to take up so much less room And it's going to allow me to put a tank on my top bar like that and have a remote carburetor. That carburetor is on a, I made a manifold out of a piece of a bicycle fork and a Tecumseh L-shaped manifold, cut it in two pieces, drove the bicycle fork in it, and the rest is history. Works great. I ride one of these every day to lunch. But this is going to be my answer to having plenty of fuel and not having to just put a tank up on the top bar and ever so often run a little more in. Hope you don't run it over. Plus, I had to drill a little bitty pinhole right there in the top to vent it, because if air can't get in or get out, gas can't get in. So that's going to be for a project down the road. And where it only had 2 screws, I went ahead and made a bail out of a radiator hose clamp that used a bolt instead of a worm gear. So it's pretty stiff, springy metal. It was hell bent in it. But I made me a bail that's removable, but puts tension on the 2 diagonal corners that the wire is on, because just those 2 screws alone, they'd squash the gasket in real good where the screws are, but the other side was squashed, but I knew what had happened. It'd be weeping and kind of sticking goo, you know, sticking dirt to gas, and I don't want any of that. So bail covering 2 screws, 2 little bolts covering the other 2. Ain't no need in tying up no more of your time. That's going to work. I just know it. It's weird though that I planned this out in my mind years ago. I'm 64. I planned this out when I was a kid before I had a driver's license, but I never did anything about it because it's too much like work, and it was easier just to keep riding, stop and put a little gas in, buy a quarter's worth of gas every now and then, or 10 cents or whatever. Well, you can't do that anymore. If you don't buy a gallon, they won't turn the friggin' pump on for you. But it's not going to be a problem. I'm going to have a big tank in place. I may have to use that for a little while, but I don't want to. But I thought you gearheads and motor freaks would love seeing that. That's just something to do. And if you can't tell it, I'm bored. But I'm having fun. That's the main thing. Thanks for watching, folks. This is John Wade on YouTube's where you find all this stuff, including 22 motorized bicycles. This was the same deal. That tank had a carburetor on it and was down here on a pressure washer. But when I put it on here, I used a manifold off of a riding mower and a carburetor off of Power Products. I didn't have to cut out my bar with my jack shaft on it. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.